Hey, happy Wednesday. The lecture today is going to be about the U.S. war in Afghanistan. The lecture itself, this is the first time I've done it. The content is pretty. The content's there, but I have not jazzed it up too much. I've been kind of busy, so we'll look at the essential ideas of the U.S. war in Afghanistan. It's only 10 slides. I have no idea how this is going to go. It's my first time presenting this information, so I built it, but we will see how it actually goes. All right. So, all right. All right. U.S. war in Afghanistan. If I can get there. All right. So the war, the reason I call it the war, it technically isn't a war. It's a conflict. Any kind of war, you need declaration of Congress for more than 30 to 60 days, and it's never really been there. This has been an ongoing conflict in Afghanistan, but it's America's longest ongoing war or conflict in U.S. history. So we're talking in time 2001 to about 2020 this year, so 19 years. So the background is after 9/11, this is what starts our war or conflict in Afghanistan. And this Osama bin Laden was in Afghanistan under the protection of the Taliban. And the Taliban at this point has large swaths of land in Afghanistan, large areas that was under control. And the Taliban is a group of leaders who controlled land, who harbored terrorists. So they're the northern tribal leaders of Afghanistan. And how they came to power, I'm just kind of backing this up a little bit. In 1996, they're rising to power. There's this conflict in Afghanistan, and they're running on the strict interpretation of Islam, strict adherence to the Quran and Sharia law. Sharia law is the same kind of law where if you steal, your hands chopped off. If you're caught in an act of uh, cheating, both people can be executed. It's very strict law. So strict adherence to the Quran and Sharia law in Islam. And the area they happen to control is full of mountains. It's mountainous terrain. A bunch of like herders and farmers in the area, plus poppy, and poppy seeds are used for like the opium supply of the world. So they inherit a very lucrative area in terms of wealth, and they also inherit an area that's great for defense. If you try to attack them, it's virtually impossible. So and a lot of these guys were fighters of the Mujahideen in the conflict with the Soviet Union in 1979 to about 1984. So they have experience fighting this combat, and they're also making a lot of money from the opium on the poppy seeds, and that they control areas of Afghanistan, and that's where Osama bin Laden is hanging out. So we start a mission after 9/11 to go into the area, and this is a soft launch. So we called it Enduring Freedom. This is our early U.S. role. So the first people on the ground arrive were CIA agents, and they're the ones codenamed Jawbreakers. And their role really is to train the different militias against the Taliban. So if they can get different tribes to wage war against the Taliban and weaken them, that means there's no death for American soldiers. We don't have to put boots on the ground, as they say. We don't have to send young men over to die. If we can cause a revolution to happen there and a war itself for people to kill people and on the right side that backed us to win, that'll be a smart move. Won't cost us too much money. So, and it does kind of work. It works. We're using U.S. airstrikes. We're backing up with different militias who are rising to power because they want power in the area as well. And they start taking land from the Taliban. All right. Yeah, even the capital city, which was under control of the Taliban at the time, was liberated and taken. And Kandahar, which is a spiritual city of the Taliban, was also taken. So early on, Enduring Freedom is going really well. This covert CIA operation to cause an internal uprising in Afghanistan, top of the Taliban, is going really well. I wish that's how the story played out. So the Taliban's land is shrinking, and Osama bin Laden is feeling the heat. And we continue to send more and more U.S. soldiers in to really finish the job. So we're close to victory in Afghanistan. The Taliban's land is losing. U.S. troops are arriving to kind of finish the job. And this is where things go south early in 2001. The Battle of Tora Bora, 2001, in December. So Osama bin Laden is basically surrounded in different mountain passes by the different tribal groups going against the Taliban. U.S. soldiers are backing them up in the hunt to get Osama bin Laden, and U.S. soldiers were given. They did not have the green light to engage. Local fighters are the ones who would take out Osama bin Laden. Uh, but all the intelligence seems to suggest that different Afghan fighters who were supposed to take Osama bin Laden out turned and flipped and allowed him to escape. And he was able to escape into Pakistan, and we do not have jurisdiction to go into another country. So Osama bin Laden escapes in this botched battle of Tora Bora. And this is where the story really starts to go south. So the main objective, the top of the Taliban, kind of has happened, but the main guy, Osama bin Laden, has escaped U.S. Forces, and he's just simply escaped us. So, and this is where things start to go wrong. The quote was the Marshall Plan gone wrong. If you think of the Marshall Plan, that's where we start to send supplies, military aid over to Europe after World War II. That we're going to try to rebuild Afghanistan in our American democratic vision. So, point number 2 here: the U.S. attempts to rebuild Afghanistan, to train a new army to stop the Taliban, and to influence local leaders to embrace democracy. And democracy usually keeps religion and government separate, as we have in the United States. It's not going to go well with a population of Muslims who who really view Islam and government should be like a theocracy. So different visions of how government should work. So point number 3, we severely underfund the military. We take supplies and troops and aid, and we start pivoting them out of Afghanistan into the intensifying area of what's happening in Iraq in 2003. And if, remember, 2003, we've toppled Saddam, but there's insurgents all over the place. We're dealing with Sunni and Shia wars. We're dealing with Al-Qaeda in Iraq. We're dealing with the rise of ISIS as well. So we're taking supplies from Afghanistan and moving our soldiers into Iraq. And that gives the Taliban a break. We basically took the boot off the neck of Afghanistan, the Taliban, so they're able to rebuild. And then the aid that does arrive in Afghanistan, it's mismanaged. Food, agricultural, military supplies, health, schools, it's mismanaged by the local government, and it's corruption's happening. And people don't like corruption, and they don't like the idea that America is intervening. So the whole plan goes wrong. The Marshall Plan, in this version, the Marshall Plan does not work. All right, so the weird thing that starts to unfold is there's two areas America's fighting after 9/11. You've got Iraq and you've got Afghanistan, and the two start to work with each other. So as U.S. forces go from Afghanistan into Iraq, that's where we're going there. Al-Qaeda forces in Afghanistan also start to follow U.S. forces, and they are going to Iraq to gain experience in combat against U.S. forces. So a lot of this part of the next slide, I use a good friend of mine for his information. He fought 2 tours in Iraq. So what he told me they started to see is this is where you see the rise of IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And these IEDs can be really crude to incredibly complex, but it's basically you have any type of explosion, and you have a detonator. A detonator could be a cell phone. A detonator could be as simple as a switch. And all you did was you could take an IED, a chemical weapon, it could be fertilizer, it could be an old artillery shell. You plant it in the road, and you'd force the U.S. convoy to go down that road. And then when the U.S. convoy got over the spot where this old artillery shell or homemade explosive would be, you'd press the button, and you'd have, boom, a massive explosion. So that's what they started doing, and they realized it works really well. Unfortunately, it kills a lot of Americans, and American forces were in just grave danger. And I'll show you later on, there's a training book to how to spot IEDs given to U.S. soldiers. But my friend told me that the thing that really feared the most was, I never knew this, but they're called EFPs. And they're more dangerous because what they basically were, this was an artillery shell that was left over from the war in Iraq. And they could plant this thing in the ground, they could detonate it remotely, and this artillery shell was oftentimes used it moved and it penetrated through the armor protection of tanks and different Hummer vehicles. That was death. These cheap explosive ones, these IED ones made of cheap chemicals, oftentimes couldn't break the armor of different tanks and Hummers. These EFPs could, and this was more favored by the Americans on the ground in Iraq. And then what they're learning in Iraq is all these IEDs, EFPs, they're transferring the knowledge on USB drives. They're not using the internet. They're using word of mouth. They're using flash drives, and they're sending all this information, this tactical information, how to like mess with Americans and kill Americans successfully, back to the war in Afghanistan. So, and then while they're in Afghanistan, all this stuff's happening in Iraq. There's more and more anti-American feelings that the Americans in Afghanistan are mismanaging things. They have no idea what they're doing. They're trying to change too much religion, the culture of Afghanistan. So in both spots, America is really losing this war against terrorism. All right. So, and then, hope that. Oh, all right. So I didn't put it in there. I had so much of pictures, but the training manual was it. If you saw any kind of rubble on the ground where an IED or an EFP could be, that'd be suspicious. If you saw people lined up along the road, kind of looking at the American convoy, that'd be suspicious. They're oftentimes hiding them in like pop bottles as well. So any kind of open canister lying on the road would make you be suspicious. But there's a whole litany of training manuals telling American soldiers how to spot these homemade explosives that were used again by the Al Qaeda in Iraq and Afghanistan. So you fast forward out of the George W. Bush years, and then you have the next president who inherits this disaster, and it's Barack Obama. Obama did something rather unique in Afghanistan. There's a troop surge. He's highly criticized and also highly praised for this, but he adds 17,000 more U.S. soldiers into Afghanistan. He's criticized because no one wants to go to a war where it's viewed as we're losing, but he's also praised because he's actually putting the number of U.S. soldiers up to that the American generals feel they could actually start to win this battle in Afghanistan. So, and the goal really was to protect Afghan citizens against Al Qaeda attacks, the Taliban. So remember, the country's kind of split between the Taliban in the north and these pro-Western support of Afghanistan in the south. And the citizens have been targeted because they're kind of viewed as sellouts, as traitors. So putting American soldiers in the south protect the Afghan citizens is a way to really boost the morale of the people of Afghanistan who liked us still. And then the numbers continue to surge. 2010, 30,000 troops are additionally sent to the combat or war in Afghanistan. So Obama pumped a lot of soldiers into Afghanistan. And it was loved and hated by the American public, depends how you viewed it. And this time, because there's so many more Americans in the area, we look at the actual raw data, about 2 times as many casualties happened during this time. The war is amplified because of the increased American presence. But America's trying to win the war, but the Taliban and Al Qaeda are also fighting more aggressively too. The war actually amplifies. And one thing you start to see is new U.S. military technology. You start to see drone strikes, and the drone strikes are remote controlled drones with Patriot missiles on them, and they're used to pinpoint an attack against the Taliban, going spots where American soldiers couldn't technically go, and would have put American soldiers into risk of their lives. So you see a dramatic rise in drone strikes. Obama gets a lot of criticism for these drone strikes because, unlike American eyes, actually in battle, you can see what's going on. You can see who's friend and foe. The criticism is a lot of these drone strikes kill civilians. True or not true, we don't exactly know, but you see a rapid increase of U.S. drone strikes against Al Qaeda and the Taliban. All right. One weird development, this whole thing is this thing called WikiLeaks. You're probably familiar with it or not familiar with it, but WikiLeaks is this journalistic online publishing. They basically have a huge amount of leaks about mostly the United States, how the government, they're able to hack in the U.S. files of U.S. government to make us look bad. Some people view WikiLeaks as nothing more than an unofficial arm of Russian intelligence that's intentionally designed to make America look bad or make us, the citizens, question our U.S. government. So one of the things WikiLeaks is able to do is they're able to hack into a Pentagon server, and they have all these secret files of unreported unreported Afghan civilians who've died in the war at the hands of U.S. soldiers, have kind of been buried by the Pentagon. And this gets released on the World Wide Web. All right. And really, there's this big fallout from Americans who don't like the troop increase, who don't like the mounting casualties, and then who really don't like the idea that America is potentially involved in some killing of civilians or war crimes. The war is just, it's not going well for the United States. All right. And we watched it in class, but the good news is that as Osama bin Laden retreated into Pakistan, eventually U.S. intelligence gets the green light to take him out, and taking him out in Pakistan is a difficult task. Uh, but eventually, two American uh, stealth helicopters land with the SEAL Team 6, and they're able to kill Osama bin Laden in a raid in his compound, and they're able to get back to Afghanistan before Pakistan intervenes. So I guess if you want to click the video, you can watch that too. So the death of bin Laden. All right. So I think it's your last slide. All right. So transition, almost there. 2014, 2016. By 2014, 2016, America is kind of really agreeing to remove itself from Afghanistan. It's going to let Afghanistan rule itself, and the soldiers of Afghanistan fight the battle against the Taliban. All right. Some U.S. and NATO forces would stay to prevent civil war, and they're trying to stop the total rebirth of Al Qaeda. And ISIS have moved into the area. They've been defeated basically by 2016, 2017, and they're moving in. So America's carefully withdrawing, but keeping an eye on the rise of Al Qaeda and ISIS. Trump selected, and his big plan was to get U.S. soldiers out of Afghanistan. And he was put him at odds with the Pentagon. The Pentagon wanted to keep more U.S. soldiers there because it had basically been, at that point, 15 years of constant fighting in America. The Pentagon didn't like the idea of leaving only to have the Taliban come back, Al Qaeda come back, and now ISIS come back. They didn't want all the lies to be for nothing. But at the same time, the president also wanted to get American soldiers out, so less American soldiers returned home in a body bag. So there's a disagreement between Trump and the Pentagon. And that's where it's at right now. We basically withdraw at this point. The longest war is over in American history. And right now, it just takes more time to have an analysis of was it positive or negative? We'll see how history writes itself. All right. That was it for the week. You're done. Congratulations. All right. Look over your notes. You got a quiz on Friday. Next week, I'm just doing 2 lessons. That's it. And a quiz on Friday. And then the last 2 weeks, it's going to be something kind of easy to end the class. And then you'll be done. All right. So only 2 more lessons to go, I think. 2. Don't quote me on it. All right. But all right. I'll see you hopefully next year. All right. Bye.